what interests me is this one here, because that one shows you that the foundation that they've been building is going to be under the ground, and nobody's going to see it. And what does a tall building need? What kind of foundation does a tall building need? A deep foundation, right? And what happens when you don't get the foundation right? That's what happens, okay? So if the foundation isn't built right for the area, for the circumstance, the building will suffer. So what kind of foundation are we building in our lives? And what is the building block of our foundation? So I want to submit the answer to that as being habits, okay? So habits are the foundation or the building blocks of our lives. So how is progress made? Habits are the cornerstone of progressing in a life of faith. We have evidence from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, from Father Moon, a founder of this church. They're basically all saying that unless we get character right, unless we get the right habits in our life, nothing else really matters. So I want to submit a couple of examples of people who introduced good habits and completely changed the culture of what they were managing. So I'd like to start with the example of British cycling and David Brailsford. So David Brailsford, he was hired in 2003 to run the performance manager or director of British cycling. Now you need to know British cycling wasn't what it is today, okay? So it was destined for 100 years of mediocrity, okay? For 100 years, British cyclists had won one gold medal since 1908, and no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France, which is the most prestigious cycling event. It takes place every year. So, and even it got so bad that the top bike manufacturer in Europe didn't want to sell bikes to the British team. They were afraid that sales would drop if other cyclists saw their gear being used by this mediocre team. So basically, British cycling was on the rocks. So along comes this guy, and his philosophy, he called it the aggregation of marginal gains. So what he was looking for is tiny margins of improvement in everything that they did. He quotes, or I quote him, "The whole principle came from the idea that if you broke down everything you could think of that goes into riding a bike and then improved it by 1%, you will get a significant increase when you put them all together." So of course they started off with bike design. They looked more closely at the bike design. The seats make them more comfortable, etc. They rubbed alcohol on the tires to make them grip better. Then they started to get a little bit more detailed. So they developed electrically heated pants to keep the rider's muscles at peak performance temperature. And then they had biofeedback sensors on each athlete to measure their performance when they were in training. They did wind tunnel training, wind tunnel testing to see which clothing was more dynamic. And they basically tracked everything. But then they went even further. They looked into other areas as well. They looked at massage gels to see which massage gel helped muscle recovery the fastest. They looked at pillows and mattresses to see which ones helped get the best rest for their... They hired a surgeon to teach the riders how to wash their hands so that they wouldn't get sick. They even painted the inside of the team truck white so that they could detect tiny specks of dust that might otherwise affect these high-tuned machines. So hundreds of other minor improvements were made, and within a few short years, the results dramatically changed. So 5 years later, the British road and track cycling team, which again had only won one gold medal in 100 years, they dominated at the Beijing Olympics. They won 60% of all the gold medals available in cycling. And 4 years later at the London Olympics, they set 9 Olympic records, 7 world records. A British cyclist won the Tour de France for the first time in cycling history. And then his teammate won it in 2013, 2015, 2016, 2017, and last year another British cyclist won it. So 6 victories in 7 years. Pretty impressive. So, that's Dave Brailsford for you. I mean, just a little incremental improvement here, little incremental improvements there, and the results is pretty staggering. Let's move across the Atlantic to Pat Riley. He's the Los Angeles Lakers coach back in the 80s. And he had a very, very talented team. The problem was they couldn't perform consistently enough to win the championships, the NBA championships. So he rolled out this program called the Career Best Effort Program, or CBE. And basically what the CBE was, it tracked basketball performance of all the athletes from their college days up until the present. And basically he found a number, okay, based upon their performance. And so then he asked the players, I want you to improve that number by 1% every year. And it wasn't just based on scoring. It was based on their determination, their heart, their spirit, how many times they allowed themselves to be barged into in order to get the foul on the opponent. You know, you don't really want to be barged into by someone like Shaq O'Neal, but they would allow themselves to be barged into and knocked into the floor in order to get the foul penalty. Diving for the ball, that was, you got points for that. You got points for rebounds, going for the rebound. Even if you failed it, going for it, you get points for that. So in this whole category, he measured the team's performance. And then he compared them with their opposite numbers in other teams. And then he compared month to month, year to year. So November this year, how did it compare to November last year? How did November compare to September? So in this way, he basically had everyone thinking about how to improve themselves, and then the results took care of themselves. So that year, he rolled out the program in October. 8 months later, they won the NBA, and a year after that, they were the first team in 20 years to win back-to-back NBA championships. So the CBE program is interesting because it is R&R. We all need R&R. We need rest and recuperation, yes, but we also need reflection and review. So reflection and review enables the long-term improvements of all habits. So it makes you aware of your mistakes, and it makes you consider possible paths for improvement. Without reflection on our performance as individuals, we can make excuses. Who here makes excuses? No. We can create rationalizations why we didn't do such and such a thing. Or we can lie to ourselves, very easy to do. We have no process for determining whether we are performing better or worse compared to yesterday. So an unexamined life is not worth living. This is what probably prompted Plato to say the same thing, 2,400 years ago. Because if you do not contemplate what you are doing, how you are doing it, then basically there's no real improvement. And even if there was, by some fluke, then we wouldn't know how much and by what margin and how the improvement was made, and we wouldn't know how to replicate it. So reflecting on ourselves and reviewing ourselves, our performance is absolutely necessary. Here are some examples of people who reflect and review themselves. We start off with Eliud Kipchoge. He's the Kenyan marathon runner, reputedly the best marathon runner of all time. Every practice run that he made, he was always jotting down areas which he felt he was weak in and needed improvement. Chris Rock, the famous comedian, before he puts on a big show, he visits hundreds of nightclubs, small little dinky nightclubs that you wouldn't have heard of, and he practices his jokes. He goes out there with a notepad and he throws out a joke and he just tests the water to see how it comes back, because the jokes are written in his head and you can't really know if they're going to be successful or not until you test them. So the ones that make it, it slims down the list with hundreds of jokes. The ones that make it are the ones that, he performs on the big stage. Katie Ledecky, she famous gold medalist, always reviewing her performance, her nutrition, her sleep, how she felt that day, hands in her notes to her coach at the end of the week. He adds his notes, and she's also tracking her opponents' scores and seeing how they're performing as well. Basically, always staying grounded and focusing on how to improve. Major executives and CEOs also do the same thing. So making course corrections is always necessary. Here's a quote from Brian Tracy. All airplanes are off course 99% of the time. Isn't that nice to know? When you're flying, you might not end up at your destination. The purpose and the role of the pilot and the avionics is to continually bring the plane back on course so that it arrives on schedule at its destination. I read a quote somewhere that if the nose of the plane is off by 3 degrees, then this tiny adjustment, if you were to just plot it on a map, would mean that if you flew from LA and you were trying to get to New York, you would end up in Washington DC, that is, not, you wouldn't be doing a U-turn. So that's hundreds of miles away. A tiny adjustment, hundreds of miles. So in life, you are the pilot of your own craft. This is Brian Tracy's skill. To reach your destination of health, happiness, prosperity, and a good life, you must do as a pilot does. You must first of all determine your destination. Yes, what kind of person do you want to be? Okay, that's important. This requires clear, specific goals written down and plans to accomplish them for each day. Second, you must take off towards your destination with no guarantee of success. You must be willing to move out of your comfort zone and take risks continually, even though you know that most of them will not succeed, at least at the beginning. And the third part, the real secret of success, is that you must be prepared to make continual course corrections. Just as an aircraft faces headwinds, downdrafts, storm fronts, wind shear, lightning, and unexpected turbulence, you will experience the same in your life in the pursuit of any worthwhile goal. The key to success is for you to keep your mind fixed clearly on the goal, but be flexible about the way of achievement. Buddha once said, according to Buddhist scripture, that the mountain doesn't mind which way it is climbed. The peak is the peak. How you get to the peak is every individual's decision-making process to determine. Back to Brian Tracy. Be open to new inputs and ideas. Learn from every experience. Look for the good in every setback or difficulty. Most of all, you must resolve in advance that you will never give up. Your ability to persist in the face of all adversity in the direction of your goal is what will ultimately guarantee your success. You make your own luck through your own hard work and determination. Decide upon your destination, take off, and be open to the necessity of making continual course corrections until you reach your destination. So the experience that we have of breaking through is the result of one grain of sand being put upon another grain of sand on the scale of life. At the beginning you think, the weights are stacked against me. There's no hope. All I have to counter the balance of the weight of life, or the weight of my disability, or the weight of my circumstances, or the weight of whatever happened in my life, my upbringing, my teacher, my mother loved my sister better, my whatever struggle you have in life is all stacked against you. And all you have to counter it is a grain of sand. Plonk. But then, there's another grain of sand. Plonk. Has it made any difference yet? No? Okay, how about another? Plonk. You get to see, however, that after one, after another, of consistently, persistently pursuing your goal, that ultimately the scale will tip in your favor after one more grain of sand is added. And that's all it took. It's like the building of an island. I remember we had this pond in our yard when I was growing up. It doesn't sound, it really wasn't as fancy as it sounds. But we wanted to build this island. So we decided to build an island. And we would go out there and take, rocks and just start filling them into the middle of the pond, and one after another, after another, after another. Nothing. I remember even one time I had this old bike and I took that and sunk it, added that to the foundation. But eventually the accumulation of all these rocks started to break through the surface. And then once we had the little island, we put some grass on it, and then that was a place where the ducks could hang out without getting attacked by the local foxes. So the point is that it took a lot of stuff happening underneath the soil, underneath the pond, before you finally saw the result. And that's the way it is with habits. You think that 1% change in performance isn't going to make that much of a difference. But how about that 1% added to another 1%, and another 1%, and another 1%? You can clearly see how those 1% incremental differences made a huge difference at the end of the day. So Eddie Cantor, famous comedian, he says it takes 20 years to become an overnight success. So each improvement is like adding one piece at a time. And the tipping point is inevitable. So we have to, in our life, commit to tiny, sustainable, unrelenting improvements. Success is not necessarily a destination, but it's a system to improve. What system do we have running our life? Because our life is governed by systems. Do we have a good system in place? Or do we have an ineffective, faulty system? Depending on what kind of system we have running our life, we're either going to end up at our destination or we're going to fly off course. So we need to constantly examine ourselves, look at our system, and tweak it. So these crucial periods of refinement, they can be daily, they can be weekly, they can be monthly, they can be annual self-reviews. You can ask yourself, for instance, these 3 questions before New Year's Eve. What went well this year? What didn't go so well? And what did I learn? How can I improve? Or you can conduct what some people call an integrity report. This is something you'll want to do once a month, once every 6 months. Once a year is kind of stretching it. But, because we all make mistakes. We all go off course. We all need course adjustments. Okay? So have I been living in accordance with my core values? Well, maybe first of all, we need to ask ourselves, what are my core values? Maybe we need to define those first of all. And am I living in accordance with them? Have I been living in accordance with them in the last month, 2 months, 6 months? Where did I go wrong? Why did I go wrong? And how can I work towards becoming the person I want to become? So, in conclusion, it is remarkable the business a person can build if they don't stop building. It is a remarkable the health and the body you can build if you don't stop good nutrition and training. It is remarkable the knowledge you can build if you don't stop studying and learning. It is remarkable the fortune you can build if you don't stop saving. It is remarkable the family and the friendships you can build if you don't stop loving and caring. Habits, they don't just add up, they compound and they spread into all areas of our life. Success in one area can easily spread into success in another. There's an interesting book called Habits, written by a famous journalist. And he starts off with this remarkable example of this one lady whose life was in turmoil. And she started by giving up cigarettes. And then she was able to give up cigarettes. And then she was able to give up drinking. And then she was able to give up eating the wrong kind of foods. And then she was able to take up running. And then she was able to go back to school. And then she was able to get her degree. And then she was able to get this top job. And within a few years, she had completely turned her whole life around. And it started with just 1% difference in one area of her life. I encourage you to read it. It's a remarkable story. But it is really a good example of what we can all do in our daily life if we just pay attention to it. And we think about what is it that I'm trying to accomplish, what system is helping me, what is hindering me, and we have the humility to look at ourselves and become coachable. That's one of the qualities of great sports players, is that they're all coachable. They're all humble enough to realize that they're not perfect and that they all need working on, that they all need areas to work on. And so these kind of people are always reviewing, always self-examining. They are their own worst critics. They don't need to read the newspapers to find out, how they perform. They already know times 10. So, and they're always grounded in the reality that life is a process and it continually requires tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. So, happy Foundation Day. Our founder of our movement, if you were here when Charles was giving his sermon, he created a tremendous worldwide foundation and set up so many organizations and did so much good in the world. But again, a lot of it is a foundation. And a foundation is sometimes buried under the soil. You can't see it. But it is what keeps that building up. It is what provides structural integrity to our lives. And so it is important for us to recognize that we have a foundation as well. What kind of foundation are we building in our life? And will it support our future projects? Will we become the kind of people that we want to be? Dave Ramsey, the financial guru, well, at least that's one description of him. He's a radio talk show host as well. He said that, for instance, if you're thinking of becoming wealthy, if that's something you feel like is a worthy accomplishment, then he said, wealth is a wonderful thing, and you can do many good things with wealth, but all wealth is going to do is it's going to multiply who you are. So you can be, if you have built this selfish foundation and you become wealthy, now you're a rich, selfish person. Okay? If you're a decent person and you want to give your blessings to the world and you become wealthy, now you are a decent, wealthy person. All the wealth is going to do is multiply who you are. So what kind of foundation are we building? Okay, that's the most important thing to ask ourselves and to review. Because if by chance we end up going down that course and we become successful, we become the 20-year overnight successes, then when we're in that foundation, when we find ourselves in the spotlight, what kind of person are we going to be in the spotlight? We should be the very same person that we have been building ourselves, cultivating ourselves to become all those years beforehand, right? So it's important for us to, on this Foundation Day celebration, to think about what foundation we are building. We can also appreciate and recognize the tremendous foundation that has been created by our founders, but we also need to take it from there. We need to now we need to start laying the cornerstone on top of the foundation. Now we need to continue building where they have left off, and that's going to be done with human capital, through our investment, through our sweat, through our artistic investment as well. So please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for reminding us of the tremendous investment that our founders, Reverend Sun Myung Moon and Hak Jahan Moon, have made in this world. We are reminded that habits don't hang up, they don't add up, they compound. We're making tiny changes in our life, and we can build remarkable results. Help us to understand that deeply, so that the examples that we see in the world of people accomplishing tremendous things, these were accomplished by tremendously flawed individuals, and yet by practicing the principle of these matters, they have accomplished great things. So in the same way, we can do the same thing in our life. If we can just understand how much value we have in the universe, and how much potential and capability we have as individuals, as a family, as a society, then we can definitely do many, many things that will contribute towards the building of the kingdom of heaven here on this earth. So please help each and every one of us to realize our value, to understand the process of how to build in the physical and spiritual worlds, and how to become the kind of people that you can reciprocate with on a deep, deep level, so that we can experience your love in our life, and we can grow in that love and become the kind of blessings that this world definitely needs. Thank you so much once again for never giving up on us, and for reaching out to us throughout the ages and trying to pull us up towards rebuilding a relationship with you. We offer this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.